Hey, have you experienced the swirl? You know what I mean. Change is coming so fast that you can't keep up, or what used to work isn't working anymore and you're not really sure why. And you have all kinds of competing priorities and you don't seem to be getting anywhere or anything done, or you just sort of feel stuck. Well, that's what our guest today calls the swirl. And we're here to talk about that and how to transform your business despite these feelings, these situations, and perhaps even help you ride that swirl. So, welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. If you're listening to this podcast, you could be here live for future episodes on your favorite social channel. You can get all future live episodes, access to those, and therefore interact with us and actually see them sooner. In this case, about 2 months sooner, um, by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, which will give you a clue where we'll be when. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. And today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Master Classes. Each master class is designed to help you become the remarkable leader and human you were born to be. Details on how to get on board for a specific skill or get discounts can be found at remarkablemasterclass.com. And with that, it's time for me to bring in my guest. I'm going to bring him in here live, and you can see him now, and I will introduce him appropriately. And let me do that now. Our guest today is Richard Hawks. He founded Growth River in 2007. Today is an international consultancy with offices and partners in the U.S. and Germany. They specialize in leading major transformational change initiatives that impact both organizational culture and business models at the same time. He is the author of the new book, Navigate the Swirl. I told you, 7 crucial conversations for business transformation. His client list is extensive and impressive, and it includes organizations you know in a variety of industries. Just a few of them are Allergan, Corning, Cox Communications, the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, Hallmark International, Johnson & Johnson, Mars, and many more, including Wrigley. I don't know if we're talking about the field or the gum, but either way, I am so glad to have Richard Hawks with us here today. Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to be here, to have you here, and to be doing this live on a Friday afternoon, Eastern time, which we are both in. As I told you before we started, I didn't know how this would go, but I'm so excited that we're going to dive in. So I want to talk about this book that's titled Navigate the Swirl. But before we get to the book, tell us a little bit about your journey. I kind of bet that you didn't wake up when you were 6 and say, I want to start a business consultancy.
When I was 13, I started, I got business cards made up with this thing that said Peace of Mind Consulting, spelled PIECE, which I suppose that's kind of a hint, but I don't think I actually understood that. No. I found my way into it, but it just naturally fit me. And once I got clear about it, I knew that's what I needed to do.
Well, we're going to talk about clarity a little bit today. And so that just should prove to everyone a little bit more that maybe you know of which you speak and which you write. So I opened with this sort of description of some things that was my take at what the swirl is. So in your words, what is the swirl and how did I do in the intro?
Oh, I think you did great. Yeah, the swirl's a wonderful description because everybody gets it immediately. The thing about it is it's not just that constant stream of another drama, another project, it's also sort of this feeling that the future is getting lost in that. And you're just, everybody's being carried forward, but where and why? And for people who are purpose driven, they're wired to be purpose driven. That's a pretty uncomfortable feeling. And so the swirl is also kind of a source of angst for people.
Well, I think it definitely is a source of angst for people, right? That's kind of why it becomes the starting point of the book. I think it's the hook in many ways.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk today about how we can remove some of that angst, understand it a little bit more, and go from there. But there's a lot of things, Richard, that you talk about in the book that I think sort of get us to what your subtitle promises, which is these 7 crucial conversations, conversations. So I want to start with one of the models that you talk about early in the book, which is what you call this 4 stages of enterprise evolution. And
Sure.
it's interesting in evolution because not everyone gets all the way to the end or even past the first one, perhaps. But talk about those briefly, and then let's play off of that a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So there are these 4 stages that all organizations go through, and you could liken them to, you know, a toddler or a baby, and then a toddler, and then a, you know, an adolescent, and then an adult. Except the difference is that people will go through those stages inevitably, and businesses, you know, it has to be an intentional journey to move from one stage to the next, or otherwise you can get stuck. What's helpful about understanding these stages is, by understanding these stages, if you're a leader in a business or anyone in a company, it really helps you kind of understand the nature of the swirl. It helps you understand, you know, well, why do these problems, dramas keep coming at me? Because the thing about the swirl is it's caused by the social system. It's not caused by one individual, and it's not caused by you. It actually doesn't care about you. It'll crush you. There's always more work. There's right, and there's a whole set of dynamics behind it. And so the thing about getting out of this role is, the only way to get out of this role is to do it in relationship with other people. And one of the things understanding these 4 stages does is it enables you to kind of step back and recognize what you're in together, where things are headed, and it's a great context setter. So the 4 stages are this.
Well, before you go there, because you
Okay,
said something
yeah.
I think was really interesting. I still want you to share the 4, but you said something really interesting, that we can only get out of the swirl with other people. And I think that that's a useful thing. Maybe I want to have you unpack that a little bit more, because I think that's a useful thing. You know, a lot of people that are I'm going to say here, whether no one's physically in this office with me, but that are here watching us now, watching or listening to us later, is that, you know, we're sort of predisposed to have people that are trying to figure out how to be better leaders, proactive, thinking about a lot of stuff, probably purpose driven, to the words you used earlier. And so oftentimes, difficult to over stereotype, but
Yeah.
oftentimes people in that mode, like I'm guessing you and me, that sometimes we think, well, we ought to be able to figure it out. We ought to be able to figure it out by ourselves. And that's quite different from what you just said and what I think you're telling us throughout the book. So do you want to say any more about
Oh,
that
this
before
is
we
the
go on?
news flash. You can't figure it out by yourself. I know you want to, and you'd love to, and it would feel great to, but you can't. It's in the same way that you can't see a blind spot, because it's a blind
It's
spot.
blind
You need
spot. Yeah,
someone else to
exactly.
point it out to you. It's the exact same idea. No, that you can't get out of this world alone. Here's the thing. What's remarkable about human beings is our capacity to come together and choose a shared vision, and then to bend reality towards that vision instead of bending the vision towards that reality. But that's only done if we're in conversation with each other, and otherwise the reality the reality, not the vision, wins. And what that means is, it means that we engage with each other on a shared performance journey, a transformational journey. We're on a journey where we've decided we want to go to a destination, and we've bought into the destination with each other. And now we are going through all of the event horizons and ups and downs, and we're balancing the fact that we've got to, you know, keep food on the table and find enough time to do something new, to try something new. And
I
it's
love
very
this
easy.
idea. I love this idea that um, that we can bend reality to the vision, but not alone. Like, it takes others to support that, to encourage that, to remind us, to encourage us, to hold us accountable for that, all that stuff. I love that.
Oh no,
Um,
imagine, I mean, you come up with a, I don't know, a new invention, a drug, or a, you know, if it's sitting in your lab or sitting in your head, I don't care what your purpose is. You're not living it. it the whole purpose of purpose is to create value out in the world. And the only way you create value out in the world is through other people. And the only way you engage with other people is through conversations. Change, reality changes. Our shared reality changes at the speed of the conversations we have with each other.
Okay, so I want to talk more about that point because that's one of the most valuable things I took from the book. But before we do that, we're going to go back. I diverted you from actually telling us the 4 stages. So tell us the 4 stages. Then I want to go to something else you just said.
Okay, so the reason that the 4 stages are right at the beginning of the book is because if you can understand the arc through which all businesses kind of go, if they're growing in the most healthy environment, right, where they're getting all the nutrients they need and growing, then you can, and all the constraints are being removed and things are moving forward. If you can understand that arc and you can place yourself in that, then you have a context where you can step back and it isn't personal. It's just the journey, because this isn't personal. We all get very hung up in it, my drama, right? But when you can see that there's a natural arc to something, it's not personal anymore. So this is also why it's really important. So the first stage is a stage that is called independent contributors. And I founded a number of businesses, and I worked with a lot of businesses in this stage. In fact, I've worked with businesses in all the stages. And here's what it feels like. You are a leader treading water in the middle of the ocean, and you're trying to keep your business afloat. And along comes, a piece of debris, and you grab this piece of debris and that piece of debris and that piece of debris, and you kind of, a little piece of, I don't know, fishing line here or there, and you bind it all together, and you kind of get a makeshift raft, and you climb on top of the raft. Now, the raft is actually made up of people. You've cut a different deal with everybody. This guy, you're paying this amount of money. Someone else, you're buying. You're getting it done. You're crafting it together, and you get the raft done. You step up on top of it, and along comes a consultant and says, that's a really crappy raft. And you're just like, I'm surviving. I'm surviving. It's very, very hard to pull together enough resources and enough relationships and to create alignment around it. But that's really that first stage. And in that stage, then you have a bunch of people. They're in it together. They've got their own thing, lots of different deals, lots of complexity. And somebody says, at some point, you realize that you're not going to be able to move forward unless you actually appoint someone as the leader. And because you're not pooling resources, you're not taking the choices. And a lot of businesses never get out of this stage. The next stage is a directive leadership stage. This is the stage that most people think of when they're talking about a startup that's raising money, it's all about nailing and scaling it, right? You've figured out how to create a value in some way. That's often happened in the first stage, sometimes over a long period of time. And now your goal is to nail a product offering and scale it. And so what happens is you end up with a small group of leaders at the top, functional capabilities in your organization, and you're just growing and scaling it. And some organizations are in this stage for a long time. I just finished working with I am working right now, not even finished, working with a very large organization. It's been in that stage for 100 years. But most businesses that survive, and most businesses that for a longer period of times, and most of the ones that have bring in capital are all in the second stage. It's called directive leadership. Then you run out of room. Go ahead.
No, number 3. Yep.
Yeah, number 3. And then you run out of room. You run out of room because the leadership at the top, the company's gotten too complex. Often what's happened is they had a simple product or service or a simple business model, and now they've got multiple businesses, multiple segments. They could be multiple geographies. There are lots of ways it can happen, but they get further and further away from the details. They can no longer actually assess what creates, they're not close enough to where value is created or where pain is felt to actually take real decisions. and you get funny thing going on. It's like a court in royalty, right? Where you have the royalty at the center and all the courtiers and all this stuff kind of goes on, but it's removed from the reality. And there's usually a wake-up call. The wake-up call is we're not innovating fast enough, our costs are out of control, we're unable to change, this kind of thing. And that triggers the need to go to stage 3. And stage 3 is a distributed leadership stage. And this is the moving from stage 2 to stage 3 is a massive deal. The team at the top that was a business team becomes an enterprise team. That means they move a level up. They're then overseeing business teams, a portfolio of business teams, and a portfolio of functional capability teams, typically in a matrixed organization. And you just went from a construct of a team, which was really functional hierarchy,
right,
to the need for real teams. The need for teams that are able to operate interdependently and independently within a matrix. And that's typically where high-performing teams come in, or you really don't have much choice but to move to them. If you can introduce high-performing teams earlier, it's way smarter because it just accelerates things all the way through. But this is where you really need to do it. And then you move into this 4th stage, which is leaders leading leaders. And a lot of big organizations today will declare they're in that stage, but they aren't really. Because to get to that stage, you have to have enough of these critical behaviors and cultural attributes in an organization that you can sustain these teams, these high-performing teams, all the behaviors around them, and then you can have one leader, say, across multiple teams. You can get self-managed teams, this kind of thing, and your cost structures can drop, right? You can get, this is the proverbial flat, limited hierarchy organization. There aren't many of them, and a lot of them, even when they do start, they calcify. They're kind of pretty fragile structures. If lots of new people are being added, if you don't have all the things to train people and develop people and all of those sorts of mechanisms. But those are the 4 stages. And the challenge is very different. The growth challenge is quite different. And the swirl is different in all 4
in
stages.
each one, right? So you said something earlier. It's perhaps the biggest takeaway that I have from the book personally, and that is, and I'll put it on the slide. I mean, on the screen if people are watching. Organizations evolve at the speed of conversation. Although I've got an extra piece of wording there. Tell me about what you mean by that.
Okay, so all of these models, frameworks, things we're talking about, right? These are just ideas, right? They only come alive when we talk about them. They only come alive when they resonate with us. The fact is what separates organizations from machines is that every one of us has agency. And I don't know, but I have 3 kids. So I learned pretty early that if we're not in conversation and I'm not paying attention to whether they're in the conversation, I'm unlikely to get the outcomes that I'm hoping for. All results in business, all results in teams happen in the context of relationships. And so the logic is pretty straightforward. A leader's ways of being are kind of here, and the things that the impact that has on relationships is here, and the impact that those relationships have on shared activities is here, and all of the outcomes that we create together is kind of at the end of the tail there. Right in the middle is relationships, and relationships change through conversations.
For good or ill, although hopefully
For
we're
good or
talking
ill.
about for good here, for sure. So you mentioned something else a minute ago. You kind of blew by the idea of high performance teams. It's a phrase that people use a lot. What's your definition of, or how do you know when you have a high performance team?
Yeah, it's actually a really simple idea. The idea is this: if you come together with a group of people and you say, you know what, we're gonna go on a performance journey with each other, where we're gonna just regularly talk about and examine how we're working together, and we're gonna pay attention to that, and measure it and improve it. Kind of think of lean or any continuous improvement process. That's going to put us on this journey, and eventually we're going to become higher and higher performing and become a high performing team. What's interesting to me is people call it high performing teams or they call it high performance teams. And in many ways, sometimes that kind of, not for everybody, but sometimes that actually reflects how they think about these things and whether they understand it's on a journey or not. I like high performing because I like the verb behind it. But that's basically the core idea. What the book lays out is, and a lot of the work that we do is we enable leadership teams. We'll sit down with them and we'll say, look, let's define this ideal future state that you want to head towards. Let's help you figure that out. So and what I want to pause on this for a second. This is that vision that you're going to bend reality towards. This is that, right? And so it's a little like being on the bottom of the stairway. Let me think about it this way. The top of the stairway is the vision you're headed towards. The bottom of the stairway is where you're standing. The steps are the steps on the journey to get there. But you can only see one or two steps, and the rest are blurry. And what happens is you take one step, and then your understanding of the top of the stairway completely changes because you've just discovered it wasn't what you thought it was, and you're now you're kind of now back at the bottom again. So these journeys don't end. It's just you have to be in a conversation around where are we headed, and so unless you have something to reach for, you never reach. You've got to define what that is, take steps towards it, and move forward. Now, in a high-performing team, those steps you're taking all have to do with taking full accountability for the impact you're having on each other and what you're doing or not doing. So you're actually saying, we're going to adopt a way of working called having a clear purpose. Here's what it looks like. We're going to adopt a way of working called setting priorities every day. And you start to put these in place, and you go on a high-performing team journey. The book lays out the 7 crucial conversations, which is a roadmap for that journey. And the thing that's so powerful about this roadmap, and it's been a roadmap, it's a roadmap that was created by working with teams from the ground up. So hundreds of teams and many different organizations over almost 3 decades, right? This is sort of so it's pretty well tested. But what it does is it maps out the order in which you would bring, if you were the leader of a team in any, either in a small business or even in a large company, what order in which would you want to have conversations around ways of working with your team, so that each set of ways of working that you implement open up, it's sort of the optimal path. It's the path of least resistance. It opens up the next possibility and the next possibility. So if you have if you try to talk about focus with a team before you've talked about purpose, they'll just go around in circles. Just like if you try to talk about strategy before you talk about focus, you just go around in circles. So there's an order in which to do it, and this lays out a map for that.
And yeah, and the book, certainly, we're talking with Richard Hawks about his new book, Navigate the Swirl: 7 Crucial Conversations for Business Transformation. And we don't have time to go through all 7 of those. So, but what I want to do is ask you about one of them specifically, which, as to your point, it's they build on each other. So it's in the middle of the list. And then if there's something about any of the others that you want to comment on or feel led to do, you can. But the one I wanted to have you talk about a little bit is number 5, which is streamlining interdependencies. I mean, you mentioned strategy, you mentioned focus. We have some clue. Purpose, like we have some clue what you mean by those, even if we haven't yet read that chapter. But what do you mean by streamlining interdependencies?
So the interdependencies are really just the handoffs and things that flow between us. And we're interdependent with each other because we can't achieve the goals or the objectives that we have without working with each other. So the people we need to work with in order to get our needs met are those with whom we are most interdependent. Whenever you design a process, for example, you're in this world of a process is a plan to streamline interdependencies. It says, this person's going to do this person's going to do this person's going to do this. The reason
And
it doesn't
agreements about how we're going to do that and how we're going to
agreements
communicate
about
about
how
it.
we're going to do that, and yeah. I mean, there's lots of, um, but the reason that it doesn't say process, right? Like you go, oh well, why didn't you just call it streamlining processes? Is because there are that processes. You have when you get into a large organization, or even a medium-sized organization, and you have multiple teams, you're often not streamlining processes. You're actually streamlining interdependencies, and in fact, that's most of the conversation. It's where you and I are rubbing up against each other is here, this boundary between us.
Yeah.
And
The
every time
customer supplier interactions.
customer supplier and there are these creative tensions between roles, right? So you go anywhere in the world and you ask people who are in product development or people who are in operations what they think about salespeople, and they'll sell anything. They'll sell their mother. They don't care whether we even,
They just want to make the number,
they
baby.
just want to make the number, baby. Exactly. And you ask the people on the sell side and on the operation side about the product development or the R&D people, and they'll say they're lost in their models, they're disconnected from reality. All they care about is potential, but they don't care about anything realistic. And if you ask the people on the develop side and the sell side about the operations people, they're inflexible, they're right, they're right. But the fact is that you can't have a business without all three of those perspectives at the table. The creative tension between those three perspectives is the opportunity. And the creative tension is the source of innovation in your business. It's
And
what
it's our
keeps it
job
on
as
track.
leaders to understand that,
Yeah,
to unleash that, and to help everyone see that.
exactly. And that's what happens. Those are the points of interdependency. Those are the specific places where those are happening. And so if you've got this tension between sales and operations, that's an interdependency point. Now let's work it out. What are the agreements we're going to reach? How are we going to make decisions? How do we both stick to it, right? And so, did I
And
answer your
that's a
question?
whole other conversation for a whole
It's
other
a whole
day.
other conversation.
So,
yeah.
in the book, you outline in the way that you just did one of the seven, all of the seven, and we don't have time to unpack all that because we need everyone to go buy a copy of this great book. But there's something else in the book. I like to find something sort of little that I think is useful that you might not get asked about on another podcast. So you talk about what you call the law of the lid, and before you say it, I think it's important for everyone who's listening to think about this because he's about ready to talk about us. So, Richard, what's the law of the lid?
So the law of the lid is a term, and it was invented by John Maxwell, who's a really famous speaker and consultant. So the law of the lid is basically the principle that a team or an organization can never operate at a level higher than the level of its leadership. And the reason this is so powerful, I bring this up, I start engagements with this, and we just come back to it again and again and again, is because if you say to a team, look, here's the law of the lid, can anybody disagree with this? Everyone will go, no. All right. So what are its implications for us if we all agree that this is a principle none of us can argue with? What does it mean about the feedback you can give to the leader of this team? What does it mean about the feedback they can give to you? What does it mean about our responsibility to go across hierarchical lines and tell the truth to power, right? What does that mean, right? What does it mean? How much trust? What does it mean about your trust in this team, in this organization, if you do tell the truth and nobody responds? Has the lid just been revealed, or are you about to leave the organization? Let me say something about one more thing about that. The most sensitive generation, I'm guessing, in the history of the planet, but history of humanity, but I'm just making that up for myself. But in the demographic with the greatest sensitivity to being purpose driven and to ineffective leadership are millennials and Gen Zers. They have their radar on those top are off the charts. And people think, oh, I'm having such a difficult time getting them to participate in a virtual world. They're disconnecting, and they're not disconnecting. You have no leadership, and you haven't explained the context for them. When purpose-driven people are put in a situation where they're being told what to do without context and without clear leadership, they're distrustful and disloyal.
You might
Yeah.
get compliance, but you're not going to get commitment.
That's exactly right.
So we need to shift gears. Our time is rapidly
Okay.
running out. I got a couple other things I want us to talk about before we go, and I really am going to shift gears. I want to know, Richard, what you do for fun.
What do I do for fun? I have
This is supposed to be an easy question.
No, it's easy. I love being outdoors. So I have a large garden, which is exploding right now because it's spring. I've got two wonderful dogs who I hike with almost every single day. And I'm constantly outdoors with my family, my wife and my three daughters. So that's what I do. I'm pretty happy, digging fence post holes or chopping trees or that kind of thing. That I do a lot of that.
Perfect. Speaking of things that we do a lot of, and I know, like many of my guests here over time, you have read a lot. So, what is it that you're reading now, or something you've read recently that perhaps you might want to share with us?
So I'm reading a book that was given to me by its author. So this is really special. It is someone who's been kind of a hero to me. It's a man named Robert Fritz, and Robert Fritz wrote a book years ago called Corporate Tides, and then he wrote another book called The Path of Least Resistance, and he really influenced my thinking in a pretty big way. So my book came out, and a friend of mine who's a friend of his said, "You two should really talk." So I got in a conversation with him, and he sent me this book he'd written called Identity. And I'm reading it right now. And it's sort of like some of the ideas that I'm in love with because I just wrote a book about them, showing up in a really very personal way. And yeah, it's fascinating. So I really enjoy it.
Identity by Robert Fritz. We'll have that in the show notes for those of you that are playing along on the podcast. So the question you've been wanting me to ask most, Richard, from the start is, how can we learn more about you? How do we connect with you? Where do you want to point people? I'll hold up the book while you talk about that.
Okay, yeah. So you can go to our website at growthriver.com. There's a lot of materials there. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm producing stuff and sending it out, and there are a lot of people asking for various things. And you can ask any questions there too. So I'd be happy to respond.
Growthriver.com, everybody. Richard Hawks with an E on LinkedIn. He and I are connected on LinkedIn, and
We are.
You can be too. So now I have a question for all of you who are watching or listening, whether it's now or whenever it is. And that is, now what? What action are you going to take as a result of this? What idea did you get that needs to be more than an idea, but action? As Richard said earlier, what's the verb, right? Like, what are we going to do with this? And so maybe it's thinking about where your business is in that evolution of the enterprise. Maybe it's thinking about how you can speed up your organization through greater, more effective, more intentional conversations. Maybe it's any number of things that might have come. Maybe it's some of the conversation we had about high performing teams and what that might mean for, or what might mean to you if you worked to build that with your team. Whatever it is, that's the most important thing here, is that you take some action. Don't take action. Sort of what was the point? You probably could have found better ways to be just entertained than listening to Richard and I. So Richard, it was such a pleasure to have you. So glad that you were able to join us today. We had a false start. We tried to do this and we had to start again. And I'm so glad that we're able to do it today. And so for all of you who are watching this live, you can follow me at whatever channel you're on and you can find the next episode. But for all of you who are on the podcast, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you will let somebody else know that you enjoyed it. Invite them to join us as well, because we'll be here next week, just like we are every week, with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.